So today I'm going to be talking about the important themes throughout the book Factfulness, which was written by Hans Rosling. One of the main themes that is shown in Factfulness is that the media distorts our worldview and hinders our ability to think logically. First, I'm going to be talking about Chapter 1, which is entitled The Gap Instinct. This chapter explains how, as humans, we have the tendency to divide the world consistently into two categories. Some common ones you may hear is East versus West, us versus them, low income versus high income, developed versus developing, and rich versus poor. These categories are not valid, so instead we use income levels to determine where one may fall, which is shown in this little graph at the bottom here. Now, the media only shows the poorest of the poor. We often see documentaries and news stories about people who are struggling to provide for their family, and ultimately, the media makes us think that this suffering is much more common than it actually is. If you look at this graph, you can see that most people in the world are at the middle income level. According to Hans Rosling, only 9% of the world lives in low income countries. Now that you know that statistic, you can really see that there isn't actually a gap. But we are predisposed to think that because of what the media portrays. Another way you can see that the gap doesn't exist is by comparing the income levels. By looking at these pictures here, you can see that across the 4 income levels, there are various similarities. Next, I will be talking about Chapter 2 in Factfulness, which is the negativity instinct. When we watch the news or read about the current events online, we see that bad news dominates the media. Humans tend to notice and pay attention to bad things more than the good things. This is why we see so many stories circulating about wars, famine, natural disasters, diseases, and terrorism. These things are reported all the time, which is why we are so used to noticing the bad things happening throughout the world. For example, like I said before, the media portrays the poorest of the poor. This is why we think that so many people are living in poverty. As you can see from this graph, the extreme poverty rate has gone down significantly. Good news is almost never reported, which is why we don't hear about this huge development in society. In reality, the world is actually getting better and improving, but we don't see any of it being reported. This makes us predisposed to expect bad news and doesn't allow us to view the world as it is, which is improving. Now I'll move on to Chapter 3 of Factfulness, which talks about the straight line instinct. People worry about world population because we tend to hear about how it's increasing dramatically. The media may also report that the world population is increasing so steadily we will run out of resources to support everyone on this planet. But in reality, as this first graph shows, the world population will eventually remain constant. The media obviously does not report this, so all we hear about is the increase of people on this earth. Now, to have more people in the world, you obviously need to have more kids, and being labeled a poor developing country comes with the misconception that women in such countries have many children. Stories or videos you see about the women in these countries may support this idea, but as you can see from this second graph, the number of babies for women has gone down. What this means is that the media has made us think about the wrong thing once again, which is assuming that a line will continue straight as time goes on. Both of these graphs counter that argument, as we see the graphs can go in various different directions. The last chapter I talk about is a chapter about the fear instinct. The world seems so much worse than it is because the media portrays it that way. There are always stories of physical harm, captivity, and contamination. Fears are practical on every income level. This goes back to the gap instinct, in which no gap actually exists because all income types share some type of similarity. This graph over here shows the number of deaths from natural disaster. You can see that as time goes on, death from natural disaster decreases more and more. But when a natural disaster does occur, every headline has something to do with the amount of casualties from said disaster. Even though the media reports a tremendous amount of death from natural disasters, they never talk about the decreasing trend line that is shown on this graph. It never seems like things are getting better because the media only reports the bad things, which is why we're conditioned to think that things will never get better. Because so many bad things are reported, we have become more fearful in situations, even though we shouldn't be. A real example of this is that women are scared to walk alone at night. This is because the media always reports rapes and other attacks on women at night. The constant reporting of these crimes is what makes women so scared to be alone. The media doesn't take into consideration, though, all the times that the women have made it home at night after walking in the dark. And although a majority of women who walk alone at night are fine, they still focus on what could happen rather than reality. Tapping into our fear instinct is an easy way to get our attention, which is, again, why the media decides to report predominantly bad things. So just to recap everything I just went over, the media clearly reports the bad things most of the time, overlooks the good things that happen, invokes people's fear instinct, and overall makes us think that the world is actually worse than it is.